Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, which is SUKKAH Lamed Aleph. We're going to be starting 2 lines from the top of the Amud. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a Braisa, Sukkah Gzula, a stolen Sukkah, V'hamesachech b'reshus harabim. Or, if one decides to make his Sukkah middle of the street, which is also considered a form of a Sukkah Gzula, a stolen Sukkah. In both cases, Rabbi Yehuda Kessler, he says a Sukkah is disqualified from use because it needs to be your own Sukkah. We learned this the other day. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Chaga Sukkah is tasalacha, it needs to belong to you. A stolen Sukkah, a Sukkah which was constructed in an unauthorized location, is puzzle. V'chachamim machshir, and they say, even this Sukkah is kosher if one sits in the Sukkah, is yotze the mitzvah. Now, what type of Sukkah Gzula are we speaking about? Amar of Nachman Machlekes. This discussion pertains to the following case. B'shetoikev es chaveri. He forces his friend v'yitziyah misukase out of his sukkah. His friend has a sukkah built. This fellow comes along and forces him out. And now he's going to sit in that stolen sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda Tamei. Rabbi Yehuda says the sukkah is puzzle is in line with his shita. Da amar ein adam yotze. That one may not be yotze if the sukkah doesn't belong to him. So this sukkah certainly doesn't belong to the one who's sitting in the sukkah. He took it away from its owner. Now actually, we have to backtrack a bit. You see, there's a discussion in Meseches Bava Kama, we alluded to this yesterday, regarding the shaila of whether or not land, property, karka, can be stolen at all. There's one shita that karka is nigzelis. The concept of gezel applies itself to karka as well. It's considered to have been taken away from its owner to the extent of the fact that the gazla now assumes responsibility. He's koine b'kinyan gzela. He has to look after that property. It's as though it's his. The Torah obligates him to look after it. In some cases we say he can actually be kind of the karka and we consider it to be his, and he just has to pay back the monetary value. We discussed this yesterday. Sometimes when you have a yiyush and shinu rishus with the hadassim, etc. So there's a basic shaila whether or not karka can be nigzal or not. Says the Gemara in this case where his friend had a sukkah, which is considered karka. Rashi explains something which is connected to the ground, mechubel karka, has a dinah of karka. It's considered his property. Now this fellow came along and forced the owner out of his sukkah and takes over that property. So if we hold that karka can be stolen, so in this case as well, says the Gemara, I karka nigzelis, if land can be stolen, sukkah gzulahi. So what status does this sukkah have? A stolen sukkah. Stolen sukkah is not kosher according to Rabbi Yehuda. It's not yours. V'inami. Alternatively, if you say karka eino nigzelis, the concept of gzela cannot apply itself to land, to property, which is so intimately connected to its owner. It always remains within the owner's domain, within his possession. There's no gzela that can detach the property from its owner. If that's the case, karka is eino nigzelis, sukkah she'ulahi. Fine, so it's not a stolen sukkah because it's still in the possession of its owner. The concept of a gezel doesn't apply itself to land, to property. In this case, to a sukkah, but at best, what is it? It's not the gazlan's. It's still its previous owner's property. It's borrowed. So he didn't steal it technically, but he's borrowing it. Sukkah shuli, it's a borrowed sukkah, in which case he's not either going to be yotze kontra b'lezer. It has to belong to you. It has to be your property. So either way, says the Gemara, we understand why kontra b'lezer, if somebody forces the owner out of his sukkah and decides to sit in that sukkah, he's not going to be yotze because mimanav shach. Either way, it's not yours. Either because it's stolen, sukkah gzula doesn't work, or because it's borrowed. So let's go over to Rashi on the top line. So either he stole a sukkah, which the Gemara explains to be referring to throwing a person out of a sukkah, or he's actually building his sukkah in an unauthorized location, which is also a gezel. Hanami gezel rabim. He's encroaching on the public's property. Rav Nachman explains, Machlekes, the pasor belezer, is only kegoin shetakav as chaver b'chaska. He forcibly removes the sukkah's owner from that sukkah v'yitzia misukase habnuya b'karkoi shel nigzal. He has a sukkah on his property, and the other fellow comes along and chases him out. And that sukkah is considered karka. V'cholam b'chuber l'karka, harihu kekarka. Rabbi Lezer l'tamei. Rabbi Lezer is in line with his opinion stated elsewhere. The Amar Sukkah She'ula in Yaitzuba b'Perik HaYash, back on Daf Chav Zayin. Hilkach memanav shachzu psul. Either way, the sukkah is possible. If you hold karka nigzelas k'leimar, im b'yeshal karka teres gezel k'shar metaltlin. If we say that just as by metaltlin, by mobile objects, gezel applies itself, likewise by karka, by property, by land, lamed b'cheskas hagazel, to be considered now as to have been transferred, as though it's been taken over and put into the rishus, into the property and ownership of the gazlan. Okay, well then it's sukkah gzulahi. Rabbi Lezer darish tasel achamish alcha v'lo gzula v'leshula. If it's not yours, either if it's stolen or borrowed, it doesn't work. V'ein nigzelas. Now, if you'll say that the concept of gezel doesn't apply itself to land, to property, it's still considered connected to its former owner. Okay, so it's not stolen, but it's still not yours. It's borrowed. Havi l'shula. Rashi brings a plukti ba'goizla. It's actually machlekes and bava kama. Ikol mandam karka nigzelas. One mandam holds a karka can be stolen. The dorish ribuyi mu'ute. He works with a drasha of ribuyi miut. In the Gemara there, ikol mandam amar. There's another shit that holds karka ein nigzelas gezel. It doesn't really relate to karka. The dorish koli prati has a different mode of darshaning, and that's how he comes to that conclusion. So in any case, it's not really relevant to our sugya. But the point is, either way, whether you hold of this shita or that shita, you're not yoytze kontra Belezer. Ultimately, it's not yours. Continues the Gemara. That's Rabbi Lezer. What about the Rabbanon? The Rabbanon l'tamayu, says the Gemara. Rabbanon hold that he's going to be yoytze in this sukkah. They are consistent with their shita. The amri adam yoytze dechi vase b'sukkah shechaveri. That one can be yoytze his mitzvah using his friend's sukkah. Right? They had a different drasha for that pasuk of Chag HaSukkos Taselecha, as we discussed back on Daf Chav Zayin. Now they actually hold, with respect to this shaila of whether karka is nigzel or not, they actually hold karka, but karka ain't a nigzelas. That's the truth. That's their shita in Bava Kama. Gzela doesn't really apply to land and to property, in which case we say it's not a stolen sukkah, it's a borrowed sukkah. Technically, it's still in its owner's possession. You're just borrowing it. You're just using his sukkah. But sukkah shulahi. It's a borrowed sukkah, in which case you're yaitse. It doesn't have to be yours. So this is the first part of Rav Nachman's interpretation. You meant to know the discussion between Rabbi Lezer and the Chachamim is with regards to a sukkah whose owner was chased out of that sukkah. Takav es chayvere v'yitziyah. He forcibly removed the owner of that sukkah, and he decided to sit in that sukkah. According to Rabbi Lezer, he's not going to be yaitze. Either it's considered stolen or borrowed. According to Rabban, you are yaitze. You can be yaitze even with a borrowed sukkah. Aval, continues Rav Nachman, Aval gazal eitzim b'sichich behen. Let's say he decided to steal eitzim and use them for his schach. In this case, even according to Rabbi Lezer, a sukkah is kosher. He didn't have error, he stole. But the fact of the matter is, he is now koine those eitzim. It's considered like it's his. So although it's not a heter, it doesn't mean that it's justified. It just means that the actual material is considered his. Rashi will explain for us, because there was a shini mas, a shini Hashem. There's actually a takana that Chacham wanted to encourage the gazlan to do tshuva, so they decided to make it easy for him. Once you built the material into your structure, you no longer have to dismantle that structure. Just pay back its value. So either way, for either reason, these eitzim are not considered the gazlans, and he's yaitze. It's like it's his sukkah. If he actually stole wood and he incorporated it into his sukkah, used it as schach in his sukkah, all agree that the victim of the gzela, the nigzal, only has a monetary claim, the value. But the actual wood material itself now belongs to the gazlan, it's considered his sukkah, and he's yaitze. That's a tremendous chiddush, because you would think, if he built it into a building, into a house, it's pretty hard to get it out. So there's a takana which allows him to keep that wood and replace it with its value. But we're speaking about using it as schach on a sukkah, which perhaps can be easily dismantled and returned. No, the chiddush of Nachman is, even if he used it for his sukkah, we say, right now it's part of a sukkah structure. You don't have to take apart your sukkah on sukkahs. And therefore he's yaitze using these pieces of wood. Now you'll notice that the Gemara, it chooses to describe this case as Gozel Eitzem V'Sichach Pehen, because the Ikar discussion here is regarding schach, right? Because the essence of the sukkah is the schach. So he took Eitzem and he used it for his schach. So we say he's going to be yaitze, despite the fact that it's stolen materials. Says the Gemara, Mimai, how do you know that to be true? Perhaps, even in this case, he's not going to be yaitze contra belezer. It's just a part of his sukkah. Let him dismantle it. It still belongs to the nigzal. He has to return the wood intact. It's a sukkah gezula. How do we know that this diuk is true, that this fact is true? Says Mimai, Midiktani Dumi Dushis Rabim. Take a look at that brisa. We see that the brisa lists together a sukkah gedula together with mesachach b'shus rabim, and Rav Nachman concluded from that connection that both cases are pretty similar in nature. Ma reshus rabim karka lavdedehu, just as the fellow who built a sukkah in the street built it on land which doesn't belong to him. Sukkah nami, the first case of the brisa of sukkah gedula, there as well, we're speaking lav karka dedehu. It's on land which doesn't belong to him. So he actually took away the sukkah itself, but if he took just pieces of wood, he just took schach and brought it into his own property and used it for his own sukkah. In that case, he's koine that eitzim, and the sukkah is his and it's kosher. Let's go over to Rashi, about halfway down the Amud. Says Rashi, Aval gozel eitzim v'sichach b'hem. In that case, we say, Ein zu loy gezulav loy shula. It's not stolen, it's not borrowed. It's yours. The kananu b'shini ma'isa v'shini Hashem. He was koinet. You have to return the value. But the actual material now belongs to him. Shini ma'asa. It was reformed, it was redesigned, it was incorporated into a structure. Shini Hashem, it's not considered part of a sukkah, it's relabeled, redesignated. V'oid mishum takanas hashavim. On top of that, you have a takanas hashavim, to enable people to do tshuva. Ein etzorach lister binyanei el yachzer dam. Chacham exempted you from returning the actual material. Just pay back its value. Now Rashi has a kasha. Udamrinan beperek hayoshin. What about the Gemara back in Perek Hayoshin, where we learned the moidu rabbanon begzula? Even the Chacham agree that you're not yaitze when it's a stolen sukkah. That's a kuliyama. We had a pasuk for that. L'cha my dar shebei limutei gzula. Says Rashi, even the Rabbanan agree a stolen sukkah is not kosher. So, how does that fit with El Gemara? If you take a sukkah gzula, in Masachach b'shus rabim, according to Chacham, it's kosher. What do you mean? It's a stolen sukkah. Says Rashi, that's speaking about a different case. Lav begoizel sukkah mechuberes lekarka. The Gemara over there, that the Chacham Amoida, sukkah gzula is not kosher, is not speaking about a fellow who stole a sukkah, which was mechuber lekarka. In which case we just concluded there's no gzela applied, and it's only a she'ula. It's still considered to be in its owner's domain, its owner's possession. You're just borrowing it. That's kasha according to Rabbanan. Nor was the case speaking about V'loy begoizel etzem m'sachim, when he stole materials and used it for a sukkah, in which case he's kainet, as we just explained. What then is the Gemara there speaking about? Ella begoizel sukkah asuya b'rosh ha'agola u'b'rosh ha'sfina. We're speaking about a very specific sukkah built on a wagon, top of a ship, the hi'atzman exelis, where you can actually steal the sukkah itself. She'en mechaberes lekarka. It's a mobile sukkah. It's not considered mechuber lekarka, in which case you've stolen something. Gezel is applied in that case. Ve'en olav lahachser damim el k'moishi bnuya. In that case, there's no exemptions. You can't just return its value. You have to give back the sukkah. Why? Why is it different than our case? The enkan mishum takanas hashavim. There's no takana there on account of bali teshuva. Sharat le'torach alei liv noisa. He didn't exert any effort in building that sukkah. He swiped this fellow's wagon with the sukkah on it. This fellow's yacht with a sukkah on it. He didn't spend any money on it. There's no investment on his part. It's straight out a sukkah gzula. He has to return the actual sukkah intact. In that case, of course he's not yaitze. So in summary, we had 4 cases here. We had a case where he took materials and used it for his sukkah. In that case, it's the kanas hashavim. You don't have to return the actual material. You're yaitze according to all shittas. It's no longer considered a sukkah gzula. He acquired it. He's kainet. It's his. We had the 2 cases in our Gemara. Sukkah gzula, which Rav Nachman explained was he forced the owner out of his sukkah. And that's mechuber lekarka. Or he was mesachich in the street. So that's again another example of sukkah gzula mechuber lekarka. We according to Rabbi Lezer, it's possible. The Gemara explained either it's considered stolen or borrowed. It's not yours. Chacham say in this case it's kosher because you haven't really stolen anything. There's no gezel when it comes to karka. It's borrowed. Borrowed sukkah is fine. But in the other case, that's what Rashi is referring to, the case where you had a sukkah on a wagon, on a boat, we actually took the actual sukkah, and it's a mobile sukkah. It's not attached to the ground. In that case, you have no excuses. It's called a masa gzela. It's a stolen sukkah. You have to return the sukkah as is. In that case, even the Rabbanon agree, you're not yaitze. Continues the Gemara. There was a story with an older woman, the Asoyle Kameda of Nachman. She came complaining to Rav Nachman. Amrle, she tells him, look, Reish Galusa, the head of the community here, Vikulu Rabbanon Deverish Galusa, an older Rabbanon, who are part of his household using his sukkah, but sukkah Gzula Aviyasvi is sitting in a stolen sukkah. They stole my material. The servants of the Reish Galusa took my material and incorporated it into their sukkah. Look, they're all using the sukkah Gzula. They're not Yetz. Tzafcha, she yelled and she complained. Rav Nachman didn't pay any heed to her complaints. So she responded. She says, Amrale. She told Rav Nachman, how are you ignoring me? Itasa, a woman, the Havale La'avo, whose father had, her grandfather, Avram Avinu, had Tlas Meya, V'tamni Sri Avdi, 318 Avadim, when he went out to pursue those kings who took Lot captive. So he went out and tried to undo that wrong, that avla that was done to his nephew. So this woman, who's a descendant of that great tzaddik, Tzafcha Kamaychu, is yelling before you, you're not paying attention to her? Where's your compassion? Look, I was wronged. Why don't you follow in the footsteps and example of my father, Avram Avinu? Amal Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman turned to the Talmidim and he said, Pe'isa hida. She's just a vocal woman. Ve'ein la elad me'etzim avad. She doesn't really have a claim, a right to claim her materials back. All she has is the me'etzim, the value of the materials that were taken from her. That's the halacha. The fact is they built it into their sukkah and they no longer have to return those materials. Sure, they have to pay back the value, but that's it. Amar Ravina, ha'ikshura de metalalta, the gzula, ikshura is a beam. Ikshura de metalalta, which was incorporated into the sukkah, the gzula, it was a stolen beam. Avdi le rabbana takanta, mishum takanas marish. Chacham made a takana, and they applied takanas marish, takana of the beam, even in this case, which means that the ganav doesn't have to extract that beam from its structure. All he has to do is pay back its value. Let's go over to Rashi. So right before the wide lines, it's about 3-4 lines before that. Avdu Rabbanan takanta litol damav. Takana is that the victim can retrieve the value, but not the actual material. We don't say enkan hefsem meruba. Look, what's the big deal? Let him extract that beam. V'yistar sukkah. It's just a sukkah. No, we say that the claim is merely financial. He can keep the beam. The mitzvah mashvile kol shiva kivinyan kva. Since it's serving as part of the mitzvah structure, which is going to be used throughout 7 days, that gives it prominence, that gives it chashivas. We don't obligate to go dismantle a sukkah and have to rebuild it on Yom Tov. No, we consider it like a structure, like any other structure, even though it's really a hut and a dira saraya, according to many shittas. But the fact that it's going to be used for Yom Tov, that gives it chashivas, and we don't have to dismantle and rebuild. Okay, says the Gemara. Pshita, of course. We just concluded the Gemara said that eitzim, which was taken by a gazlan and put into a sukkah, need not be returned intact. Pshita, mashnome eitzim. Why would a beam be different than eitzim? Perhaps I would think eitzim shchichi. Eitzim are commonly found. Just go to the local lumberyard and find some more eitzim. Therefore we say, look, why go ahead and force him to dismantle a sukkah? If it's just as easy for you to buy new ones, replace the old eitzim, let him just pay you its value, rather than have to take apart a sukkah. Aval haylo shchicha, about a beam which is not so commonly found. Amalei, perhaps in this case, we're going to take up the victim's case. We'll say, look, on the one hand, you have to dismantle your sukkah. On the other hand, you're grossly inconveniencing him. He has to go find a new beam. That's not right. So perhaps in the case of a beam, we should not apply takanas morish. Rather, he should return the beam intact. The chiddush is no, even when it comes to a beam, since it's part of a sukkah structure, we leave it as is. We're not machalik between a house and a sukkah. But, says the Gemara, Hane Mila B'Goy Shiva. This only applies throughout the 7 days of Yom Tov, when the sukkah is in use. You don't have to dismantle and rebuild. Aval Basar Shiva. Once the Yom Tov is over, once the 7 days of sukkah use are behind you, Hadar Be'ene. To extract that material and bring it back to its owner. Because now you're done with this sukkah. And there's no takanas marish after sukkahs. But v'chiber betina, if you attach the material with cement, afilu lachar shiva, even after Yom Tov, nami, even then yavle dmei, all you have to do is return its value, because now it's become a permanent structure. And takanas hashavim applies in this case as well. Now the Ritva actually says, now we understand why Rav Nachman was, so to speak, giving this Isha a hard time. He was actually trying to help her. She was complaining that he took her wood. He was trying to postpone her. If she would wait till after Yom Tov, then she would have a valid claim. As the Gemara concludes that after Yom Tov, the Nigzal can retrieve his material. But she was insisting and yelling, no, I want to get it back now. He had no choice but just to ignore her, because it's on Sukkot and on Sukkot itself. There's a takanas marish, takanas hashavim, which doesn't allow her to claim the actual material itself. Okay, so in summary, we learned about 4 cases of a sukkah gzula. In the case where he was gazel eitzim v'sichach ben, which case he's koina, and there's a takana, which only obligates him to pay back the value, the damim. According to all shittas, it's considered his sukkah, his schach, and the sukkah is kosher. We have 2 cases where there's a machlekes. Takav chaver v'yitzir, he forced his friend out of the sukkah, and he took over that structure. Or he was masachich in the street. In both cases we have a gzela pertaining to something mechuber lekarka, or as it says, that it's considered a borrowed sukkah, and he's not yaitze. In a borrowed sukkah, you are yaitze. And we actually had one tzad in the Gemara that, according to Rabbi Yehuda, considers sukkah gezula because karka isn't exalted. Either way, it's not his. In the last case, where he actually stole a sukkah intact, a sukkah which was a mobile sukkah, transportable sukkah, b'reish hagola, or on top of a svina, according to all shittas, this sukkah was actually stolen. It's a sukkah gzula, which has to be returned intact. In this case, all shittas agree that it's a sukkah gzula. It's not yotze, is mitzvah. Continues the Gemara. Tani, we learned in a brayse. Yavish pasel. You have a lulav or esrog dried out. It's pasel. Rabbi Yehuda Machshir, he says dried out. It's fine. Amar Rava, I'll explain the machlekes. Machlekes belulav. The discussion applies to a lulav only. Why? By esrog, it is a pasuk. L'kachtan lechem by Marishan creates hadar. Hadar, beautiful. Prettiness applies to an esrog according to all shittas. Question is regarding lulav. Do we connect lulav to esrog or not? Machlekes belulav. The Rabbanan savri makshinan lulav to esrog. Rabbanan hold we connect lulav to esrog and we say ma esrog by hadar. Just as hadar applies to esrog, it has to be nice and beautiful. Af lulav by hadar, likewise, a lulav has to be hadar. Yavish is not hadar. Rabbi Yehuda savar loy makshinan lulav esrog. We don't connect one to the other. And therefore, although a esrog needs to be hadar, but not a lulav. Avo be'esrog, of course, tivra koil be'in hadar be'inon, because the pasuk says creates hadar. Now Rashi learns that aside from a kal v'chomer, the other yud gimel midas, the other formulas like the gzeir shava and the hekesh, one cannot introduce on his own. You can't originate it unless you heard it from your Rebbe, you heard it from Sinai. So Rabbi Yehuda didn't have a Kabbalah to implement this connection, this hekesh between lulav and esrog. Esrog needs hadar, but not lulav. Tosfos disagrees. He says we find many rayas that a hekesh can be originated. A person has the ability to introduce his hekesh, even if it wasn't a niskabel from Sinai. Rather, Tosfos says that Rabbi Yehuda held that misvara. It's not logical to require hadar by lulav. Tosfos says, "Lo shayach lashon hadar el beperis." When it comes to a pri, to an esrog, it's a nice, pretty, beautiful fruit. But that concept doesn't apply to a branch, to a lulav. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, even a dried out lulav is kosher. Asks the Gemara, is that so? Ubelulav lo boy Rabbi Yehuda hadar? Rabbi Yehuda doesn't apply the concept of hadar to a lulav? About tonight, listen to this Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda holds that you meant to tie together, right? The lulav, the hadassim, and the aravis. Boy eged, you have to bundle it as one. Now, what material do you use to bundle? What kind of strap do you use to tie them together? Vatnan, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, yagdenu milamalo. Sorry, before we get to that, it's going to be the next Gemara. But getting back to this was halacha mentioned in our Mishnah. If you have the leaves of the lulav which sort of opened up, spread apart, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Yagdenu milamalo. You have to put them back together, tie them together. So tie them up on top so they lie neatly alongside the spine of the lulav. Right? Then the Kama held, Nifru do all of his kosher. Rabbi Yehuda says, go ahead and tie it back together. My time alav mishon de boy hadar. Shall we not assume that this requirement is based on hadar? Has to lie neatly alongside the spine of the lulav. Has to be hadar. Says Malay, no. Kediktani time. The reason why Rabbi Yehuda requires tying those leaves back together is because of the following reason. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mishum Rabbi Tarfon, the pasuk says kapis tomorrow, and we learn kafos, bound, tied up, v'imhoya parad yik petenu, which means that if it was open and separated, you have to go ahead and bind it back together so that it lies nicely together. So it's unrelated to hadar. The pasuk indicates that it's meant to lie in that manner. Says the Gemara further, "V'loy bay Rabbi hadar." Is that so according to Rabbi Yehuda? Hadar doesn't apply to lulav. Atnan. Ein oigdenes halulav el b'minay. The Rabbi Yehuda. What type of band, what type of strap they used to tie together the lulav with the other minim? Minay has to be the same type of material, like the minim that you are bundling. It has to be lulav material or hadas maravas material. You can't use other foreign materials. That's the Rabbi Yehuda. Should we not assume it's related to beauty and aesthetics? My time, should we not assume the reason is lav mishum de bayahadar, because he needs it to be nice, has to match. So you see the hadar applies to lulav as well. Doesn't lie. Actually not. That's not the reason. I'll prove it to you. The Amar Rava, afilu b'siv. Even though Rabbi Yehuda requires minoi, but it could be something which isn't necessarily nice looking. Afilu b'siv, you can use the fiber which grows in the bottom of the palm tree, as long as it's the same species, same type of material of palm. Afilu b'ikra dedikla, or the skin, the bark of the tree is fine. So it's unrelated to beauty. Vela my time with Rabbi Yehuda Hassam. If that's the case, that it's not Hada related, why then does Rabbi Yehuda insist on using the same min? Well, that's due to a halacha concern. Because Savar Lulav Tzarech Eket. Rabbi Yehuda holds that Lulav needs to be bundled together, right? It has to be made into a new entity. Lulav Hadasim and Arabbis. V'maisi min achrina. Now, if he's going to use a different type of substance to tie his minim together, you're running into a new problem. You're not meant to add, right? Bal Tosif, you can't add to a mitzvah. He's going to add a new type of material into that bundle. Havalu chamisha minin. Now you're running into problems because you've created another min in your bundle. You have, instead of 4 minim, you have 5 minim being used for your mitzvah, which is an Isra Bal Tosif. And this is Dafka Rabbi Yehuda, because according to him, the eged is a single entity. So when you go ahead and you bind another min in there, you're creating a new entity which has an additional min above and beyond the required number of minim, and you're over about Tosif. Whereas according to the Chachamim, who don't really require minadin, you don't have to bundle them together. In that case, even if you choose to tie them together, you're not really joining them together as one. And Tosif later explains this, that when you take another min and you tie it together, he says, you're not really shaking and taking that other min the way it grows. It's sideways, bundled around the other ones. So it's not really a way of handling a min, in which case Tosif explains that it wouldn't be considered Bal Tosif according to the Rabban. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, that this is the way to do it. You have to bind together the minim. So by using other material to do that, you're creating an entity, right? You're meant to bind it together with a strap going sideways. That's the way to do it. If you do it with another piece of material which is unrelated to the minim, you're adding a new min, which is Bal Tosif. So in any case, it has nothing to do with Hadar, and we don't really have a raya against Rava, who tells us that when it comes to Esrog, Kuli Alma Maskim, you need Hadar. It's a pasuk. When it comes to Lulav, Chacham say yes, Hadar, they connect Lulav to Esrog. Rabbi Yehuda does not connect one to the other. When it comes to Esrog, of course you need Hadar. Has the Gemara Rabbi Esrog Riboy Rabbi Yehuda Hadar? Is that true? Is that true? That when it comes to Esrog, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that Hadar is a requirement. But Tanya, listen to this brayso. Arbas minin shebelulav. Those 4 minim, 4 types used in the lulav mitzvah, lulav Esrog Adas and Arabbis, Kishem Shem Peichsam Hen. Just as you're not meant to deduct any one of those minim, Kach ein Masifin Alein. Likewise, I'm to add another min. Lo Yimotze Esrog. Suppose you couldn't locate an Esrog. Lo Yave Lo Parish. You shouldn't bring a quince instead. V'lo Yirima, nor a pomegranate. V'lo Davar Achar, nor another fruit. Either Esrog or nothing. Kamushin Ksherim. Let's say the minim are withered, partially dried out. It's still okay. Ksherim. Yevation, they're fully dried out. Psulim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Af Yevation Ksherim. Even if they're dried out, they're kosher. In fact, I'll prove it with a story. Once again, Rabbi Yehuda proves his point with a story. But Rabbi Yehuda Ma'asav B'nei Krachin. So the story involving the city dwellers, Rashi explains, they don't really have access to palm trees, so they had a shortage of lulavim. Shoyu Marishin Lulavein Libnei B'nei. They would inherit their lulavim, bequeath it to their children, their grandchildren. It would be passed on from generation to generation. Apparently, says Rabbi Yehuda, dried out is fine. The Chacham responded, Misham Raya. How can you prove from there? That's not conventional. Ein she'asat chak raya. It's a time of necessity, a time of need. They were short. But typically, you're not meant to use a dried out lulav. Now, the Mfarshim seek to explain the Gemara here. It sounds like neshasat chak, you can use a dried out lulav, which isn't typically kosher. How does that work? So some say that even though Hadar, according to Chachamim, is a requirement, but Chachamim had the ability to be selective when it comes to applying Hadar. Ran says the concept of hadar was an undefined concept which was given over to the Chachamim at their discretion. In this case, where it's either hadar or no mitzvah, then they rule that better do the mitzvah even at the expense of beauty and hadar. But typically, you're not meant to do that. You're not really yaitse in a conventional circumstance. In any case, says the Gemara, what do we see from this price? A ketanimius. In any rate, we see Rabbi Yehuda Omer af yiveshin ksher. Tanakam said dried out minim are disqualified, and Rabbi Yehuda responds by saying no, yiveshin are fine. Lashon Rabbim yiveshim ma'ilava esrig. Should we not assume he's referring to both esrig and lulav? No, he says the Gemara lulav. It's specifically to the lulav, but when it comes to an esrig, it has to be hadar. In fact, the story that he proved his point with involved only a lulav. We don't connect lulav to esrig, but when it comes to an esrig, creates hadar, it has to be beautiful. Omar, let's go back. We learned geshem she'in peichsen men, just as you don't go down from 4 to 3 or to 2 minim, you have to have 4. Kach ein mesifan alein. Likewise, you don't add an extra min. Pshita, of course. Why would you think otherwise? Why would you be allowed to add? There's an isra bal toisif to enhance a mitzvah above and beyond the requirement. Perhaps I would think to say hoyel v'amar Rabbi Yehuda lulav tzarech eged, since Rabbi Yehuda requires the lulav to be bound together with the other minim. Now perhaps this can result in a leniency. Suppose he brings another min, a 5th min, and doesn't really bundle it together with the other ones, so it doesn't relate to them. This stands on its own, and the other one stands independently on its own. They don't connect, they don't relate to each other. And perhaps there's no problem of Bal Toisif. The added min is not part of the process because it's out of the bundle. So according to the Rabbanan, there's no hava mina that it would be mutter. Since eged is not a requirement, then whatever you have in your hand is part of the maasa mitzvah, and you have too many minim. That's an isra bal toisif. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it's out of the bundle, it's out of the loop. That's not part of the mitzvah. Kamash balon. Oh, the chiddush is no. And the pshat would be that although it's not part of the bundle, the fact is you, the person, the gavra, the fellow doing the maasa, is handling more than the necessary number of minim. And therefore that in itself is considered an isra of Bal Tosef. Kamash mala. So that's the chiddush of the Bryce. Continues the Gemara. Amar. So let's go back again. Lo yimotza esrei. This fellow couldn't locate an esrei. Lo yavi lo yiriman. He shouldn't substitute it by using a pomegranate, le parish, a different fruit, lever acher. You can't use any other fruit, esrig or nothing. Pshita, of course, says the Gemara, an esrig is an esrig. Ma'odatem, perhaps I would think laisi. You should go ahead and substitute it with another fruit for the time being. Ki heichedil shloilishtakach teres esrig, so that we keep the concept of esrig fresh. So that the community, the kids, will be mindful of the mitzvah's esrik. So at least do something as is occurring. You're not yotzei, but perhaps it's better than nothing. Kamashmon, the chiddush is no, don't do that. It's just going to create confusion. Zinman denafik chubermei. At times it can create confusion. Dasila misrach. It might continue. A kid will say, well, my father, we have a minhag in the family, we shake a lulav with a pomegranate. So better do without the mitzvah than create a false and a confusing impression. Says more Tashma, let's bring another raya. Raya to what? Rava told us that even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that esrog needs to be hadar. Listen to this brisa. Esrog hayoshin pasel. If you have a old, dried out esrog, it's pasel. Vir Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Oh, pretty clear. Even by esrog, according to Rabbi Yehuda, hadar is not required. Tiyufta the Rav Tiyufta. In fact, this is a refutation on Rav. The bottom line is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the word hadar in the pasuk does not indicate niceness and beauty. The Gemara soon will tell us what Rabbi Yehuda does use the word hadar for. But in any case, it's a stira on Rava. It's pretty clear that according to Rabbi Yehuda, whether it's lulav or esrog, hadar is not a requirement. Really? V'lei bai hadar? Rabbi Yehuda does not require hadar by an esrog. V'anan, listen to this Mishnah. Hayara karsi. You have an esrog which is as green as leek. Rabbi Machsher said it's fine. Rabbi the Paisel, he said it's no good. Gemara assumes lav mishum de bai hadar. Should we not assume the reason why Rabbi the is Paisel is because he requires hadar. And a green esrog doesn't conform to that. Has more no. Mishum de loy gama pera. The reason why Rabbi Yehuda does not allow a green esrog, nothing to do with aesthetic beauty, nothing to do with niceness or hadar. Has to do with the fact that it's an undeveloped fruit. Loy gemar pera. It has to reach a certain stage in its development process. Say, well, this is a fruit and can be used for mitzvahs, lulav, which requires a pre-eitz hadar. Once it's green, it's not yet reached its level of maturity to be considered a peri. Now, Tosfos points out that we have some esrogim. Esrogim habayim lefanenu yirokim kekarsi. Sometimes we get green esrogim, and Tosfos says there will be kosher. Why? Because even according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you know for a fact that these esrogim, when they're kept around for a couple of days, they start yellowing and get their proper color, then that's an indication that these esrogim have already achieved enough maturity and are considered gemar pera. This we do all the time. We take the green esrogim, we put them in a kli together with some apples, and the reach, the scent coming from the apples, actually has a yellowing effect on those esrogim. So Tosfos says that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, will be okay because Rabbi Yehuda is just speaking about those green esrogim which will never turn yellow. They're too young, they're too unripe for that. But when we know that reach a certain point that with a little manipulation they can change colors, then that's fine. And it's mashma from Tosfos that even while it's still green, it's okay. Because the Gemara reverts from the connection, the color hadar connection. The Havamim, the Gemara figured green is not hadar, but then the Gemara reverts from that. It has to do with development and maturity. And therefore, says Tosfos, if we know for a fact that these will turn yellow in time, then they're considered mature enough and are kosher for lulav. Continues Gemara Tashma. Listen to this right. Again, we're discussing whether or not Rabbi Yehuda requires hadar by esrog. Shiur esrog cotton. What's the smallest esrog you can take? Rabbi Omer ke'egg, the size of a walnut. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ke'beitza, the equivalent of an egg. Lav mishum deboy hadar. Should we not assume Rabbi Yehuda requires a larger esrog because of hadar? Loi, says the Gemara, mishum deloy gamar pera, for the same reason as we mentioned earlier. Smaller than that, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is considered undeveloped and not considered enough of a peri to be kosher. But as far as hadar, that's not a requirement. Tashma, listen to this right. Ubegadol, what's the largest esrog one can use? It can't be too big. It has to be small enough that he can handle 2 esrogim in one hand. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, no, way larger than that. Afilu echad u'shnei yodav. Even if it's bigger than that he needs 2 hands to handle 1 esrog, that's okay. Afilu echad b'shtei yodav. My timer. Why does Rabbi Yehuda require a smaller size esrog? Lav mishum devay hadar. Should not assume it's based on the hadar requirement. Smaller is nice. Loi says, well, that's not the reason. There's a more practical concern here. Kiva dama Rabba. Rabba tells us, lulav bimin, ve'esrog b'smar. The proper way of shaking lulav is lulav with the hadas and arava in the right hand, 3 mitzvahs in the right, and the esrog, which is just 1 mitzvah in the left hand. Zimnan de michlefilei. It can happen that he was handed the minim in the reverse order. So the lulav was given over to his left hand, the esrog in his right. Va'asi lafuchinu. And he's going to look to reverse it, to switch it around. And while he's going to maneuver the minim, va'asi lifsuli might drop and the esrog will become puzzle. So it can't be too large in size. It has to be small enough that he can properly maneuver it from one hand to the other. Let's go over to Rashi, 2 lines from the top. Kivadam Rabba esrog b'smal v'lulav b'yamin Why? Mishum dehachat las mitzvahs ve'esrog chad mitzvah. The reason why we hold the lulav and the hadas and rav on the right, because it's 3 mitzvahs and has more chashivas than the esrog, which is just 1. That's going to be held on the left. V'zimin the machlif and lei. It could be that he was offered the minim in the reverse. Shenaisim lei esrog minim. They gave him the esrog to his right. V'lulav v'smoil, and his lulav he took what is left. V'tzarach lahafchan, he has to go and switch it. Miyad liyad. V'lecha ze esrog v'lulav ba'achas mihadav, which would necessitate grabbing onto all the minim with one hand until he can actually switch it. If the esrog is too big, there's a concern. Shema yipol miyadav, it might drop from his hands. B'yivsel she'er by neck, it might get a hole. Concludes the Gemara. Ve'ela Rabbi Yehuda Kessler hadar. So we say that hadar is not a requirement according to Rabbi Yehuda at all, whether by lulav and even by esrog. What about the pasuk which says "L'kachna lechem creates hadar"? Hadar doesn't mean beautiful. Ahu hadar v'ilone mishana l'shana. The pasuk is merely describing the type of fruit that you meant to take. What type of fruit? One that lives on, stays on in the tree, mishana l'shana, from year to year, and that's the esrog. Esrog doesn't necessarily fall off its tree. It could stay on for a number of years. We learn from here that the pasuk is referring to an esrog. So at the end of the day, the Rabbanan require hadar by esrog, creates hadar, which means beautiful according to them. And by lulav as well, we connect the two, lulav to esrog. According to Rabbi Yehuda, hadar is not a requirement by lulav or by esrog. What does hadar mean? Hadar bi'ilone mishana l'shana. We learned in the mission Shalashera v'Shlera and Dachas as puzzle. So you have a lulav which came from an Asherah tree, which came from Iran and Dachas, a city whose inhabitants worship Avodah Zarah. So these are Avodah Zarah materials, puzzle for lulav use. Shalashera puzzle, you mean to say a lulav taken off an Asherah tree, which was worshipped, which is an Avodah Zarah tree, is puzzle, even by the Evid. V'amar Rava, listen to Rava. Lulav shel Avodah Zarah lo yital. He shouldn't use an Avodah Zarah lulav. L'chatchila, it's not proper. Rashi says it's ma'us l'gavaya. It's repulsive. It was used for avera. V'im not al kasha. But after the fact, if he used it, it's kasha. In our Mishnah we say, but the evidence possible. Says the Gemara, we're speaking about 2 different types of avodah zaros. Hacha in our Mishnah, where it's possible, is speaking about Asherah de Moshe Askinan. It's taken from an Asherah tree, which was in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Tusei Mechtas Yuri. That tree is going to be burnt. Pasuk says he meant to burn those Asherah trees upon entering Eretz Yisrael. And being that it's slated for Sreifa, for destruction, this lulav, which is meant to have a shear of 4 tefachim, loses that prominence, loses that size, chashivas. It's going to be burnt. And therefore, Tusei Mechtas, Tusei means chopped up, broken up. Tuti Mechtas Shiuri, its shear is chopped up. It's like broken into million smithereens. It doesn't have a large size unit status. It's not regarded as a big lulav. It doesn't have a shear because it's going to get burnt and destroyed. Whereas Rava was speaking about an avodah zarah which doesn't necessarily have to be destroyed. In which case we say l'chatchila, don't take it, but b'di'evet it's kosher. Let's go over to Rashi, 8 lines from the bottom. B'asherah de Moshe, oisam shahayu b'shas kibush Eretz Yisrael. Those Asherah trees, which they encountered when they captured Eretz Yisrael. Shetzrichan hakas of Sreifa, k'dichsiv Ashereim tizrifum ba'esh. Explains Rashi, v'lulav tzorach shir. Lulav needs to be a certain shir. V'hai command de mechtas shiuri. This Asherah lulav is considered as though it's lacking shir. Given the Sreifa koy, it's meant for burning, for destruction. It doesn't have that prominence. What's the point of shir? What's the difference between a small thing and a big thing? A large item has prominence, has chashivas. It's a large unit. It's big in size. It can serve in a greater capacity than a smaller thing, so to speak, right? But if something is meant for destruction and burning, it's not going to be used in any case. It's on its way out. It no longer has that chashivas and that prominence. So that's unique to Asherah de Moshe. But when it comes to ordinary avodah zarah, Tosfos explains that there are different types of avodah zarah. Sometimes an avodah zarah is going to have to be burnt, like an avodah zarah which was worshipped by Yisrael, which the Gemara avodah zarah incidentally says that Asherah de Moshe conforms to, because they worshipped those trees when Yisrael were worshipping the Egel. So it's as though they were preparing it for them, so to speak. It was related to the Yisraelim. It was attributed to the Yisraelim, was considered Avodah Zarah Shel Yisrael. Tremendous chiddush. And therefore that Avodah Zarah has to be burnt. There's no way out. There can't be mavatal of that Avodah Zarah. So that's the Mishnah Bayas. That lulav needs to be streif, needs to be burnt, needs to be destroyed, has no shear. Rav was speaking about Avodah Zarah of a guy, which doesn't necessarily have to be destroyed. It could be mavatal, it can nullify, it could cancel Avodah Zarah. In which case we say this concept doesn't apply. Not meant to use it, but the evidence kosher. Continues Gemara, prove it. Dei kanami. Take a close look at the wording of the Mishnah. It's pretty clear that the lulav of the Asherah is speaking about an Asherah which is going to have to be burnt. Diktani. The Mishnah puts it together with Dumya the Ernedachas. Together with Ernedachas. It sounds like it's a similar case. An Ernedachas, a city whose inhabitants serve the Avodah Zarah, and they're going to be burnt. All the nechasim in that city are going to be burnt. So the fact that the Mishnah equates the two, puts it together on the same list, Shema Mina, it's pretty clear that they're both based on the same context, the same reason, the same concept. That the Asherah and the Ernedachas are slated for Sreifa, in which case they lose their Chashivas and their Shir, and that's why they're Pasal. Okay, let's do a quick Chazar of today's daf. We discussed the halacha of Sukkah Gzula, according to Blazer, Pasal, according to Chachamim Kasher. Rachman explained that the Brisa is speaking about a very specific case of a Sukkah Gzula. And the conclusion of the Gemara was we actually have 4 cases. When he took materials and used it for a SUKKAH, all agree he's kind of that material. All he needs to do is repay the value. And since he's kind of, it's his Sukkah and it's kosher according to all shittas. The Brisa was discussing 2 specific cases. One, where he forced the owner out of his Sukkah, or he built a Sukkah in an unauthorized location, in Shus Rabim. In both cases, it's a Sukkah which was mechuber lekarka and stolen. The Gemara tells us, according to Rabbi Lezer, it's not Yaitse. Whether it's because karka can be stolen, it's a stolen Sukkah. Karka cannot be stolen, it's a borrowed Sukkah. In either case, it's not his. Sukkah has to be yours. According to Chachamim, karka cannot be stolen, in which case we say it's a borrowed Sukkah. And you can use a borrowed Sukkah on Sukkahs. And as Rashi points out, if he actually stole a Sukkah which was B'reish HaGola, a portable Sukkah, according to all shittas, this is a true Sukkah Gzula, because it's not mechuber lekarka, it's like any other item, any other metatlan. Gezel applies itself to that. And a stolen Sukkah, according to all shittas, is not kosher. Even the Chacham agree, we learn from a pasuk, L'cha, it has to be yours, as opposed to stolen. The Gemara told us about takanas marish, which applies even in the Sukkah. It's takanas hashavim, that if one incorporates stolen material into his structure, he needs to pay merely the value and not the actual material. The Gemara is a chiddush that this applies even on sukkahs, despite the fact that it's just a temporary structure. And as the Gemara concluded, this is only during sukkahs. But after sukkahs, you have to return the material unless he was mechaber with tina, with cement, in which case it became a permanent structure, and takanas hashavim applies. We had the story with the Itasa, who complained to Rav Nachman, and then we discussed the concept of hadar. According to Rabbanon, applies to esrog and to lulav as well. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the word hadar is not referring to beauty, rather hadar b'ilane mishan l'shana, and therefore there's no din of hadar by lulav or by esrog. Not meant to add or detract from the number of minim, nor are you meant to substitute. Using a different type of fruit can come to michshel and confusion. In the last piece of the Gemara, we learned about Avodah Zarah. So if it's a Avodah Zarah of a goy which can theoretically become nullified and cancelled, the chatchil you meant to use any material from that Avodah Zarah for mitzvah, b'diavad your yaitze. However, when it comes to Avodah Zarah which is going to be burnt and destroyed, for instance, Asherah de Moshe or E'ar Nidachas, since it's going to be destroyed, it loses its chashivas. It's as though it has no shear, and a lulav needs a shear, and therefore it's possible. Kol tov to you and atzlacha Rabbah.